In part 1, we used a Boolean value to track the state whether or not an alert was visible on the screen. We toggled the variable from false to true and back again based on user actions. When working with state in Flutter, we usually want to go deeper than that and tie the user interface directly to a state variable somewhere in the app. The state variable will be part of a stateful widget. When user events occur, that means the state of the app must be updated. We update the state variable, call the setState method on the stateful widget. The call to setState causes Flutter to redraw the widgets in the widget tree in order to reflect the updates to the app state in the user interface. If you are coming from SwiftUI or Jetpack Compose, you're going to feel right at home. The data contained in an app is held in a type that we call a model. Such type models the data that needs to be displayed in the app. For the case of the bullseye game, we need to keep track of the target value, the current value of the slider, the current round of the games, and the total score the user has achieved throughout all the rounds they played. We'll create a model class named GameModel to model a bullseye game, and the widgets in our user interface will be linked to the game model in order to update the data they show when calls to setState are made.
We're going to get started by creating a GameModel class. Open your project in progress or download the starter project for this episode. Create a new file called GameModel.dart. We're not going to use any classes from the material library, so there's no need to import materials.dart. Now create the class definition. Next, we're going to define 3 contexts for the slider start, the score start, and the round start. Let's define a few variables. These will hold the state of the game model. We're not providing a default value, but instead defining them by their type, which is an integer. Next, we need to create a constructor. The constructor initializes the object. Okay, now open up main.dart. Import our new game model. Now let's add a game model property to the game page state. Make it private. Notice the late modifier. This indicates to Dart that we aren't going to set the variable in the constructor, but we will initialize it at some point before we use it. The initState method is the first method called when the object is created. This is called only once in the lifetime of the object. This is useful when we want to say assign a value or initialize any variable similar to the condition that we have here. We're setting the game model to start in the midpoint, which is 50. Don't worry about what it means to overwrite or call super.init. This goes deep in the world of object-oriented programming, which you'll learn as you dive deeper into the Dart programming language. Now the slider needs to access our model. Open control.dart and import GameModel.dart. Next, create a property for our game model and update the constructor. Now to update the slider to use the model. Notice that the game model is defined in the stateful widget, yet the slider is in the control state. To access the parent widget, we use the widget field. Let's start with the value property. We access the model off the widget. From the model, we get the current variable and convert it into a double. Now in onChange, we'll set the new value passed into it. We'll add it to the model's current field, converting the new value to an int. Since we're using the model, we don't need the current value, so make sure to delete it and the current value property. We're getting an error. That's because we haven't changed the control widget. Open main.dart and update the control passing in the model. Finally, update the score with the model. And that's it. Build and run the app or hot reload. At this point, the score is still showing fake values. In the final episode of this course, we'll pass in some real values to our slider.